Now, greetings everyone. Welcome back to another Spaceship to the Absolute. Welcome aboard. We have Josh here as he's going to be lead pilot tonight. Actually, I'm co-piloting, and we thought we'd continue with what we were discussing before about Josh and how he found his spiritual, soulful path through the Gurdjieff work, and continue that because I think it's quite interesting to hear how people walk the path because it helps other people understand why they walk the path. It might not be exactly the same identical path we've all walked, but I think it's quite influential to discuss these kinds of things. So, Josh, welcome back. And we were last time talking about, we'd gone about your how you'd come to the Gurdjieff work. And where did you want to continue from?
Yeah, I just thought, I'd just carry on sort of, I suppose, kind of linearly, the story of my life. And just for that reason, sometimes it can be interesting to hear, people's personal accounts about, how they come into what interests them or spiritual paths or teachings, that they find interesting. And also it's just another way of talking about the same ideas. It's fairly rare. I mean, I do talk about these kind of topics with different people, but I suppose the bulk of that, that talking tends to be more about just that you could say the ideas or the practices and not so much from a personal, perspective. So it's just, it's another chance, I suppose, to talk about the same things you could say, but just from, different angle, from a personal sort of perspective or experience. So yeah, like last time we were chatting, I kind of talked a bit about my childhood and having some strange experiences as a young kid, and that probably kind of contributing to me becoming a seeker. And so I just thought I'd kind of, I suppose, maybe recap some things before going forward. Mentioning some other kind of experiences that I had from a young kid. I don't remember, like I said, I mentioned I went to a primary school that was kind of a light sort of it was a Christian school, but it wasn't like a heavy Catholic school. So there wasn't wasn't like crammed down your throat, but it was a Christian influenced school. And so we
Gentle
did have
Jesus teaching, as I call it. Gentle
yeah.
Jesus teaching.
Yeah, it was a it was a I don't know, I can't remember what denomination they are. I think it's Church of England. So there was a light Christian influence. Like we did occasional sort of I can't call it Bible studies, but they, because we were we were only young kids in primary school, like prior to the age of, I think it's like 7 to 11. So we did have like a kids occasional reading sessions where the teacher would read to us some like children's version of the Bible stories and things like that. And we did sometimes they would invite we had assembly, it's called, where everybody gathers together, usually in the morning. And sometimes they would bring in speakers. Sometimes they would be maybe like nuns, or I don't know, vicars or priests. And sometimes they even brought in people from other traditions. I remember occasionally them bringing in like some Buddhists, or I think maybe like some people who are interested in Hinduism and stuff. So they weren't like, only Christianity is viable, but they also brought in some speakers from some other traditions, which I always found quite interesting. But why I'm saying that is in the sense that, so I suppose that was, in a way, I guess, my first introduction to, I don't know, you could say the idea of God or something like that. I don't really remember when I first heard the word God, or I don't, maybe it was my parents or maybe it was in school, but I don't really remember when the subject was first, brought to my attention. But again, as far as I can remember, like in my, direct experience, I don't remember it ever being like a topic of concern for me, or a question. It would just seem to be something, from my experience, as far as I can remember, that was always evident. Like the God was a reality. It wasn't something that was really, in a sense, questioned. Like, who is there a God or isn't there a God? It just seemed to be something that was kind of self-evident in my experience. And the only way I could describe that in a way is saying like that I always felt kind of a presence. Again, it's just a way of talking about it, but as if there was always a presence, with me. You could say that I was never really alone, and then regardless of whether I was in company or not. but there's always a felt kind of sense of a presence there. And I guess then, yeah, that was what I, kind of labeled as God, So obviously that, again, that's something that's played a part in all my experiences, and I guess as well, like turning me on to seeking. So in that sense, yeah, I always felt like I was, you could say then, in the presence of God. My attention may be more drawn to it or not in a given moment or not. I might be more, as a kid, I might be more occupied with playing or something, and my attention could be invested in that. But it was something that was always felt to be there, and sometimes would be, my attention would be more drawn to it or not. And so that was never really a question for me. Like, obviously, I remember some of my other friends who were in primary school, again, although we were in a Christian school, it just happened to be one of the only schools in the area, so it wasn't like necessarily that the kids' parents had sent them to that school because they were Christians. Most of the children who attended, like my mates and stuff, they weren't like active Christians, or they weren't believers, say like that. They were just kids, and they just happened to go to that school, which happened to be a Christian school. So again, I can remember like when we were growing up that, I can remember for some of my friends group that became a topic of concern for them. Like they kind of sort of you could say lost their belief in God, or like, expressed that they never believed in it. Whereas for me, I was always like, well, again, it wasn't really a topic that came into question. It was just seemed to be something that was self-evident in my experience. And like I said, yeah, growing up, I did have some strange like experiences, like out of body experiences and lucid dream experiences. And also, like I said, I had a sort of a memory of watching my mother go into labor with me, sort of like the first kind of memory I had of sort of being a disembodied spirit. So again, all those strange experiences played into me, I guess, being a seeker. And so yeah, so that sort of led me, I guess my parents were into Gurdjieff and some of these other teachings, so there was materials and books and things in the house, and so that, at a certain point in time, I came across the books and was drawn to them for some reason or another, and started reading them and got into those ideas and started doing some of the practices and some of the exercises and stuff like that from Gurdjieff and from other, like, other traditions as well, like Hinduism and Christianity, different things like that. And like when I started doing some of those practices, it did bring back or sort of reconnected me with some of those early childhood experiences that I'd had, like about sort of out of body experiences or experiences of like the subtle body. Like I talked about this kind of subtle energy that people could experience, this kind of physical, but not physical in a way. Not, it's a different kind of quality to it. It's like physical sensation in a way, but slightly different. So when I started engaging in those practices, it did bring back some of those experiences I had as a kid, and also seemed to, amplify and develop them. So in terms of the Gurdjieff work, I would say that from that sort of, I guess I was already dealing with what he would call the kind of Kesdjan world, or the world of essence as a young child. And I think maybe most kids do. I think that's, part of our nature, that as a very, very young kids, we're kind of more centered in that kind of world. And, as we grow up in the process of like conditioning and stuff, I think we tend to, you could say, fall out of it, or it becomes more obscured. We become less aware of it, you could say. I mean, we kind of live in it regardless, because it's part of our human nature. We're all, you could say, have access to the Kesdjan world, the world of the second body, but and we live in it. Like in the same way that we all have a physical body, we exist in the physical world. But it's just, it can be more. Some people may be more aware of it than others. It could be more conscious or more apparent for some people than others. That's the world that they are operating in. So yeah, so when I started engaging in the practices, I mean, again, as a young kid, I'd already been doing just off my own back and kind of naturally, not because I had any sense of like I should be doing it or it was something to do, but I'd often been doing like things like meditation and stuff like that. But again, not knowing, I didn't really have an idea as a young kid that there was something called meditation, but I'd often do like practices with my attention, like focusing on the body, like trying to explore, like, say, physical sensation, or doing things with like my active imagination, like active visualization and things like that. So I'd always been a kind of experimenting in that way. And like produce, those things seem to produce strange experiences often anyway. So I'd always kind of been playing with those kind of things. But yeah, when I found the formal practices and started doing those exercises, it did kick off what I would say kind of a reawakening to what we could call the Keston world, or the second body. Like I was aware of a kind of a process of this sort of what he calls like the coating of the second body, where like you can gain a more permanent connection to that kind of could call it the subtle body or the energy body. It's kind of like a doppelganger to the physical body, but just kind of has a different materiality. So I was aware of, as the years went on, from sort of like, again, I said I came across the work earlier, about 11 years old, the books and stuff. So I started practicing some of the exercises, like Gurdjieff in Life is Real. In the book, he outlines a few exercises, 3 or 4, I think, in the book. So I started practicing them from quite a young age, and some other things that I was interested in, other kinds of meditations that I just kind of came up with myself. And yeah, looking back on it, I can see that there was a kind of linear process of a development of that, you could say, the Keston body then, or that side of my nature, which again, I'd just say is our essence, that we're all born with it. We all have access to that world, but it's just that we can become more conscious of it, or it can develop, in the same way as we imagine that as the young child is born, at some point it kind of develops self-consciousness and becomes aware of its own body. So you can look at that. You look at it as an analogous process. That this awareness of the second body can kick off in a kind of a similar fashion. Something can kind of begin to awaken to it, and it can become more into focus. Become more conscious of it. So in like from sort of 11 till, I guess, my kind of mid-20s, I would say that there was a sort of deepening of that awareness of the second body and some of the kind of capacities that go with it. Like it can bring altered states of experience, and it can change your your experience or relationship to what we could call the natural world. Because again, the idea goes that the average person, you could say, is kind of cut off from the world of nature. Or back in the day, we could also call that what people referred to as the world of spirit, or the world of spirits. They like sort of in early animist cultures, don't they? They kind of say that everything has a spirit. There's a spirit of a tree, a river has a spirit, rain has a spirit, or sometimes they talk about a rain god or whatever, a river god, but you could say they're just words for the same kind of thing. So with the kind of awakening of that side of my nature, then that did change my relationship to nature. Like you could start to become aware, you could say, the nature spirits, or like with animals, it can change your kind of the form of experience or the relationship that you can have to it. Again, some people can have more of a feeling for nature than others, and can be like, pro the environment, or be concerned with animal welfare and stuff, and that's great. But it's a kind of a different thing. They could still be doing those things, but not really have much of awareness of the spirit world. It is kind of another world that some people are more awake to than others.
So you're feeling at one with nature. You can go out into nature, and you just feel connected to nature and the elements and the different weather patterns and such like.
Yeah.
Because I was always like that as a teenager, and on into my 20s and onwards.
Yeah, lots of people are, but I'm just saying that there's this kind of you could call it like an altered mode of perception that can arise, where you can kind of start to, you could say, communicate or experience with the spirits, or you could call it the spirit world, or you might even call that, in Gurdjieff's terms, the world of essence. You could start to kind of know the essence of an animal or the essence of a particular plant. That can be kind of awake to that world. Again, it's kind of hard to describe it in normal language, but again, it does change. If a person is coming from the perspective of just being a kind of physical being, which seems to be what most people operate in a physical world, it can be quite shocking, because like that world of essence is not strictly physical. Like the physical world, like and the physical bodies of animals, you could say, are a physical counterpart to the spirit world. You know, they're kind of like a physicalized embodiment, you know, of like, you know, a physical rabbit is you could say a physicalized expression of the essence of rabbit, if you want to put it that way. But if we're just operating in the kind of physical world, we only know the rabbit through its physical form. We don't really have a perception of its essence, or like you could say a direct kind of communication with it. So that with the kind of development of the Kesdrian body, you could say, are they awakening to that kind of side? That kind of world of spirits or the world of essence can kind of open up to you, and that can bring about different different kinds of experiences that, you know, again, relatively speaking, they can be out of the norm. And that's also why the Kesdrian world is, or the subtle world is often linked with different capacities like telepathy or things like that, you know, experiences or outer body experiences. You know, you could say that they all comprise that second world, and call it that, the Kesdrian world. You know, if we call the physical world the first world. So like during those years, like practicing those things, there was a kind of a greater awakening to the Kesdrian world. And like I say, it kind of transforms, you know, how you experience the physical world, because you could say it's no longer, the physical world is no longer experienced from the physical vantage point. You could say that it's, you know, it's seen from as being an expression of the spirit world. You could say that. And again, some people say that in a sense that is supposed to be man's natural, quote unquote, natural world. You know, really that's the world you could say he's meant to, you know, meant to occupy. And I think in the Bible, you know, just a quote comes to mind. I think there's a, I think it's Christ who says it. I think he's talking about John. Is he talking? He might be talking about John the Baptist, or he's talking to him. And it kind of says like John the Baptist was something like the highest man who was born of woman, something like that. But he says to him, but even though you're the highest who was born of woman, you're still the lowest. You're still lesser than the lowest in regard to those who are kind of entered the kingdom of heaven. You know, so you could liken that to like the difference between the Kesdrian world, which is really, you could say, the natural, what should be the natural world of man, and which he kind of does live in. Every man lives in it, but they can just be kind of more awake to that or not. So the difference, that's like the natural world. John the Baptist, you could say he woke up to his kind of Kesdrian nature. And then the world that the Gurdjieff talks above that, you could say, of the third body, the world of the soul, which is kind of a jump again.
So he's like the highest earthly man.
The what, sorry?
The highest earthly man, earth man. But
Yeah.
get to these other realms where everybody, well, not everybody else, but most people are just still earth people, even though we are supposed to be part of the earth. We're all supposed to be reaching up and out to the other realms.
Yeah. You could say that's the spirit world is kind of the natural world, or, you know, you could say it's the natural world of man, or the world of essence, or you could say like is what is supposed to be his natural world. But again, in Gurdjieff's terms, he says that many people have, you could say, have become distorted, you know, for various reasons, and so they live in a lower world. Like, you know, in terms of his worlds and the numbers that he gives them, the world of essence is world 24. And then, like, you could say the world of personality, if you like, which is kind of like the earth, what he calls the earthly realm. Like, essence is the world of the planets, world 24, and world 48 is kind of the world of personality, and called kind of what he calls the physical, you know, the physical world or the earth. So, again, as humans, you know, we all have an essence, and you could say that's more, doesn't he? He says that's kind of what we're born with. That is what is really man's own, is his own essence, where the personality is kind of just like an apparatus for dealing, you could say, with the physical world, and the material that it functions on is just acquired. You know, it's external material, whereas the essence is, like, you could say, the man's own. You know, so yeah, you could look at the essence as really the natural world of man, and again, you could say that we all live in it because we have essences, so that gives us access to the world of essence. But again, it just seems in general that people aren't necessarily kind of conscious of that or awake to that, or like he talks about the essence being covered over by the crust of the personality and doesn't really get to kind of live and grow. It doesn't get to receive impressions, or again, it's just like saying the person isn't really kind of conscious in the world of essence, you know. And like, again, that second world and the world of essence kind of comprises most of what you could say is considered to be, or a lot of, the world of spirituality. You know, like people might be interested in like energy work or healing, or people might be interested in communing with the spirits and stuff. You could say that most of that spirit world of spirituality does kind of comprise the second world, and that's what people are like either dealing with, or you could say trying to deal with. And so, like, yeah, during, like, I don't know, the 10, 12 years or so, from the age of 11 till the mid-20s, again, I would say personally that there was a kind of, that's what I was kind of, you could say, dealing with. Like, I was doing, you know, the usual kind of practices and stuff that people could do. And there was a kind of an awakening to the world of essence. And like, yeah, it did, like I say, it changed my experience of the physical world or the natural world, in the sense that it kind of transforms it. It's no longer just seen as a physical world, but it's seen as the world of spirits or essences, you could say.
Do you
And
feel that nature was working with you as well, though? It's like a two-way thing. It's kind of hard to explain,
yeah,
isn't it, how that works?
yeah, because you could say that again. You could say if that's the natural world, the spirit world, you could also say that that's the world of life. You know, again, in the materialistic way of looking at things, we just associate life with the physical, the physical cells and the physical processes. But we're saying that, yeah, that's an expression of life, but it's just a materialized expression of it. You could say the essence of life itself is not just contained in organic matter and physical bodies. You know, you could say that the world of life is the spirit world. And so I think Gurdjieff says something like, you know, if you're trying to work on yourself, you will get help. And he talks about conscious spirits. You know, he says, "Oh, nature, right? Great Mother Nature will send help, you know, your way." And again, that's tied in with what he talks about the world of fate. You know, like he says that sort of the world of essence is the world of fate, and different essence types, you could say, have different fates connected with them. But again, he says if the person isn't kind of centered in the essence, or is living in that kind of sort of lower world where the essence is clouded over and isn't really kind of getting to grow, that the person just lives in the world of accident. You know, they don't really live in their they don't live in the world that's appropriate to them, and then in a sense they don't live in the fate that's kind of fated for them. You know, so again, you could look at fate that way as, yeah, you know, life. Then the essence of life will be helping your essence to realize whatever its fate is. You know, so
Yeah,
yeah,
what your
definitely.
potential is.
Yeah. Or again, you could look at it as like bringing different people into your life, or different circumstances that it might put you in, or different experiences that you'll have. Again, in the world of fate, you could say that everything has a kind of meaning that way, or it has a purpose, or it could be utilized because it's, you know, it's working towards the realization of your, you know, your individual fate, your essence. So definitely, I can think of, like, you know, look at it that I was getting help, you know, through people or being put into situations, or, you know, things like that. Definitely. And you could say that, yeah, the spirit of life, the great Mother Nature, was doing that. And like I mentioned, like the part of that second body, then the Kenshin body is like a body. It's kind of like a doppelganger of the physical body, but it's made of a different material. And like I said, it can separate from the physical body, and that's kind of what happens in like out of body experiences, or like astral projection and things like that. And also, there's a kind of a similar thing goes on in experience of telepathy. Like again, Gurdjieff says that like what is generally talked about as telepathy is a kind of a manifestation or a faculty of the second body or the astral body. You know, again, he talks about like different rituals that different traditions would do in the past to establish connections between people. You know, like he gives the example of Christ, like saying, "Oh well, you know, he actually gave them his physical body to eat. You know, eat some of his actual flesh and drink some of his blood, so that they could establish a kind of an astral connection or bond." You know. So again, like out of body experiences and like telepathy and things like that, they kind of go along with the, you know, the second body. But another side of the second body is kind of beyond that, in the sense of it's not just a body, you know, that can operate, you could say, in the physical world, like separate from the physical body and like move around, or like, you know, astral project or remote view, you know, those kind of things. They're all part of it. But also the other side of it is, you could say, the side of it that's more situated in the world of essence, in the sense that it's the world that exists outside of physical time and space. So again, I give the example, I think, in the previous talk, by saying that if you kind of wake up to that side of it, you can have insights maybe into like past lives, you know, or maybe future lives, because again, the perception that's kind of made available there is not limited to like physical time and space, you know. It's not limited to one place at one time, so you can have insight into like, you know, the past or the future. And so that kind of awakening of the Christian body, or awakening to that world, can be a great liberation, you know. Again, you could say it's like waking up to the essence of man, the side of him, all this, the world of spirit, you know, the spirit of man, which is kind of eternal, you know.
But it's making use of it for the right things, isn't it? Making use of doing this so that we're working with the universal cosmic laws and
Yeah,
not be
yeah,
using
I'm just,
this for your own personal gain.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, it's hard to talk about. I mean, you know, I guess people would like to think of themselves as being, you know, selfless and motivated by, you know, whatever motives. But
Well,
again,
some
it's likely that,
didn't.
yeah,
Some of
it's
them didn't
likely
use it for their own gain. We've got black brotherhoods out there and dark occult
that,
people who have attained
yeah,
this kind of thing, but are using it misusing
yeah,
it. Where Gurdjieff, and I know you are using it to work with the planet and the universe, and
yeah,
you know, alleviate his endlessness, his suffering, his sorrow, not
yeah,
his sorrow.
yeah, definitely. I know what you know. Yes, there could be people who are more like overtly malevolent and want to, you know, gain power so that they can use them over people. But I'm just making the more, you know, the more sort of tongue-in-cheek point that,
Hmm.
in a sense, the seeker, you could say, is still, you know, you could say still seeking for sort of egoic motivations, but and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, you know. You know, again, the person can have the aim to want to serve, you know, to want to be of use, to, you know, but it's still their personal aim. But you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Um, I've forgotten what I was saying, but so like, yeah, part of that
Sorry.
awakening of part of that awakening of the chemistry can open up a perception that gives you access to the world that exists beyond time and space, or what we tend to talk of as the eternal realm, and that can give you insights into like such things as like previous lives, or, you know, past insights into the past, or insights into the future. And it can be a great liberation, because it can free you up from a lot of the causes of suffering or concerns that people can have. Like a lot of like, you know, a lot of the things that trouble people are to do with the, you could say, the physical world. Then, like, you know, I might be worried about my health in the future. You know, what happens to my physical body? I might be worried about keeping a roof over my head. I might, you know, or so on and so forth. But they tend to be sufferings that are associated with the very nature of being a, you know, a physical being. And so, if there's a kind of awakening to that second body, that it can be subjectively, like the experience of it, can be very liberating, because it can free you from a lot of these concerns that go along with the perception of myself as just being a kind of limited, um, fallible physical being. You know, like again, if I wake up to the fact that I existed, or my essence exists beyond the physical body, then I know that there's more to me than just the physical nature. You know. So again, that can be very liberating. Like if you know, if someone wakes up to that kind of second world, or the Christian body, it can be very liberating. And also, there can be, you can gain much more control over your own estates of experience. Like again, Gurdjieff says that the second body has a kind of greater authority to it than the kind of physical body, and can control the physical body. Or you could say that it has much more control over states of emotion and thought, you know. So if a person wakes up to that side of themselves, then again there can be liberation from the kind of a lot of the negative thoughts and feelings that often, come about unbidden, and that people can feel themselves, suffering from, like negative self-talk, or what you might talk about as negative emotion and different kinds of identification. So that can be very liberating. There can be this greater capacity to control the mind, or to produce mental states or emotional states. And again, that's kind of linked to why Gurdjieff sometimes calls it paradise. Like, again, I think I remember him speaking to Bennett, J.G. Bennett, in one of his books, and he says, like, Bennett was talking to him, saying, "Oh, I think, telling him about some of his experiences, saying, I think, this is my Christian body is developed." And, was kind of asking for feedback from Gurdjieff. And Gurdjieff kind of said, yes, yeah, you have kind of coated your Christian body. And now you kind of have access to paradise, this kind of greater liberation. But you also said to, don't be satisfied with that. Don't be satisfied with paradise, but, go on to what you call the Son Absolute. Again, you could say, like, indicating sort of the realm of the soul then, or the third body. I think our time's going to cut out, Debbie.
It is, yeah, it will in a few minutes. So maybe we should finish on the Sun Absolute and continue this another time, because that is what we should all be working towards working with. And for those of you who haven't read Beelzebub's Tales, that's obviously where his endlessness, the God, resides. So I want to thank you very much, Josh. We need to continue this another time, if that's okay. And you've still got your Beelzebub's Tales blog at the WordPress.
Yeah, I think if you type in Gurdjieff and Beelzebub, one word, it should take you there to the WordPress site.
Because it'd be good to talk next time. We should discuss what got you into starting to write as well. I think that would be an interesting one to chat about.
Yeah, definitely.
It's quite weird writing about this kind of work, but it's also very accessible, your writing, and I think people would gain a lot from it. So hopefully they are tuning into your blog.
And push them there, get them there somehow.
Definitely all go out into nature, go and sit under a tree. That's how Buddha found enlightenment. Not straight away under the first tree he went to, but being part of nature is a really important part of all this. And you're absolutely right. I used to have nature. I spent a lot of time in nature as a kid. I was very lucky where I grew up, and I've always lived in countryside if I can, and not in a city. Those cities have parks. You can always go to your local parks and go and get to know the nature there, or get to know, I don't know, feed the pigeons from your flat window.
Yeah.
So thank you, Josh, for coming on board.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for listening.
And we shall all speak again soon with everyone. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.